Good morning. Whose life do you celebrate today? 10 hours after my dad died, I found myself in a legal predicament with my son regarding a goldfish. It was Christmas Eve, and months earlier, I had promised my son Jake we'd get his dad a goldfish for Christmas. At the time, it seemed trivial, silly, and simple. It was anything but. You see, I had not anticipated my father's sudden decline, and that Christmas this year would involve saying goodbye to Dad after a 10-year battle with endless chronic illnesses, combined with the complexities of a global pandemic. I hadn't anticipated the 2 a.m. phone call saying his time here on Earth was done. It was in this moment I found myself in a pet store trying to comprehend the clerk as she explained she could not legally sell my son and I a goldfish due to us not having the appropriate tank prepped for the occasion. The planner and mother and me fought back tears. In the haste of navigating nursing homes, a global pandemic, a hospital transfer, and hospice, and saying my final goodbyes, I had neglected Googling how to buy a goldfish. Standing under the fluorescent lights of the big box pet store during the most wonderful time of the year, my mind races to come up with a backup plan. Meanwhile, my son, ever so resilient, suggests we peruse the pet store aisles for something, anything, a pet we could take home that afternoon. He guides me blindly up and down the aisles, and before I know it, I am seconds away from making a multi-year commitment to a hamster. My dad, who loves pets, laughing at me from above. I am all in until my son confirms that hamster poop is beneath him and that it'd be my responsibility to clean it up. In that moment, reality, parenting, survival, whatever you want to call it, kicks in. I regain control, fight the holiday crowds, and through somewhat questionable tactics and a lot of grit, secure 4 tropical fish, tank food, and accessories, and even make it home in time for our 3 p.m. family Christmas Zoom celebration. Later that week, when the adrenaline of navigating the joys of Christmas with my then 8-year-old while settling the affairs of my father come to a head, I start writing a book called Now What? Navigating Life After Loss. I've been writing forever, and like many in this room, I've been navigating the complexities of loss while still continuing to live for decades. And in this time, I've learned a few lessons that have helped me that I hope can help you as well. Like so many, my understanding of loss started with what I had seen depicted in Hollywood. The 5 stages of grief packaged up beautifully with the beginning, middle, and end. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. These bold and beautiful emotional tributes you'd have in these pivotal moments that help you understand the glorious meaning behind their loss so that you could move on with life, get to the other side of grief. This all made sense to me until I lost my mom at 18. It was a trifecta of mental illness, alcoholism, and an eating disorder, although her death certificate says acute renal failure. It is odd watching the woman who made you decline during your coming of age time. It limits your ability to be a selfish teenager and to have irrational arguments about things that don't matter. At least it did in my house, until the time I thought my mom was doing better. I thought she was going to be okay. And in a moment of teenage 18-year-old angst, we got in a fight over laundry, with my final words to her conscience being, "Fold your own laundry." She died just before midnight on Easter Eve, a piece of me going with her. What followed was an emotional roller coaster I didn't understand and didn't know how to navigate. The stoic Scandinavian me felt if I could just keep moving, everything would be all right. My only reference point, Hollywood. The high achiever believing in me that if I just checked the boxes, got through the stages, then I would be okay. I felt the pressure, real or imagined, I'll never know, from well-intentioned friends and family to hit these milestones. How are you doing, folks would ask, wanting and wishing me to be okay. It was easier to lie, to stuff the grief away, and to put it on layaway and live my life. And for much of my 20s, I did. I lived blindly checking boxes: college, career, awards, apartment, car, house, promotion, boyfriend, many, many boyfriends if I'm being honest. And on the outside, I had dealt with grief and was living life to the fullest, right? But inside, I was dead. And then the rent came due. Not everyone's story is the same, but I've learned at some point, grief catches up with you. At least it did for me. Despite my best efforts to run from it, I knew in order to live my best life, I needed to lean into it. For me, it was a boy that changed me. I mean, isn't it always? His name was Steve23543 on Yahoo Dating. I had just moved to Ashland. You see, I knew something was wrong inside of me, and my drinking was a little out of control, no longer appropriate for someone approaching 30, and I needed a change, but I didn't know what that meant. So I quit my job in TV news and took a job here at Northland College. It was the first of many crises. I was 27. And I met Steve, and I fell in love, and I no longer wanted to be numb. I wanted to have all the feels, but I didn't know how. And so I finally went to therapy. It was here I learned a lesson that Hollywood never bothered to tell me, that the 5 stages of grief weren't developed for those left behind. Those stages, developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, were developed in response to people coming to terms with dying, those diagnosed with chronic illness. Now, don't get me wrong, the feelings are real and applicable for many grieving, but they are not linear, and they are not stages the way Hollywood portrays, as many of you know. There is no beginning, middle, or end, and they are about as predictable as Lake Superior. For days, these feelings can be calm and soothing, beckoning you to bathe in all of the memories. Only a day later to knock you upside down with an unexpected riptide of pain. And similar to Lake Superior's waves, it never ends. It changes, evolves, is unpredictable, but lasts forever. And instead, you learn to live with it, to navigate it, to embrace it, and in some respects, can't imagine life without it. At the time, I didn't understand this. I just knew I loved Steve. I knew I needed help. And so after 10 years after my mom died, I finally reached out and began unpacking my grief. It was messy, beautiful, scary. I cried for the first time in years sober. And as scary as it was, I let people in again, knowing I might lose them. And even if I did, I would somehow be okay. I got married, I checked more boxes off, I found my footing. And then Sully happened. After years of trying to get pregnant, Steve and I decided to adopt. It was a complicated and at times convoluted process. The lengths you must go to attract an expecting mother, the gimmicks, the lottery, the home test, the financial burden, it was a lot to digest in hopes that a couple might choose you. Every time we were passed up for another family, I was reminded of elementary school when boys picked players for their kickball teams. Pick me, the little girl inside me was shouting. And over again, we were passed up, until we weren't. An older couple chose us. She was 8 months pregnant, couldn't get an abortion despite wanting to. He was married to someone else and had no desire to be a father again. They had no doubts. The social worker assured us this was one of the best adoption cases we could have hoped for. And after meeting and confirming this was a good match, we started to plan our future. We believed in an open adoption, and they were open to that. Over burgers and fries, we casually discussed what holidays might look like. My friends throw me an impromptu baby shower. It's a bit risky since we know mom can still change her mind, but I want to believe. Everything is perfect. Until it isn't. We get a call. Sully's alive, but mom's having doubts. What does that even mean, I think to myself? We were supposed to be at the hospital when he was born. The social worker is sugarcoating the hard truth. Mom's changed her mind. My husband, the eternal optimist, asks how likely it is she'll still go through with the adoption once she's had a moment to breathe. Pretty much zero. My heart breaks. I ask for a call, an opportunity for an explanation, a small part of me believing I could get her to change her mind. The mom relays a message back to us. I don't owe them anything and I don't want to talk to them. We never hear from her again. Succinct, to the point, but it's hard to swallow. I do my best to resume daily living, to go through the motions, eat, sleep, work, repeat. I know that if I keep living and that if I allow the pain in, that perhaps a moment of joy will follow. A few months later, my girlfriends and I rally for a weekend of love and laughter on the North Shore of Lake Superior. We drink wine and shed some tears, and the ebb and flow in happiness and grief reminds me that I'm strong, that there will always be a special place for Sully in my heart, but my heart is big enough to go back in the adoption pool. I reckon with the reality that I'll never get closure from Sully's parents, that perhaps closure isn't a real thing, but a marketing ploy that plays out in an attempt to mark the beginning, middle, and end of grief. I realized that closing the book on Sully would break my heart. It somehow suggests that time erases all that Sully represents: my desire to be a mother, my desire to love someone unconditionally, and I commit to holding space for love and loss in my heart. On Sully's first birthday, my son Jake is born. Coincidence, perhaps. Interestingly, both my girlfriend and I got pregnant right after that North Shore trip, and both of us have been struggling to conceive for years. Go figure. Maybe it was the wine. For months during my pregnancy, people kept calling Jake my miracle baby and telling me Sully happened for a reason. Maybe, but it doesn't change the intensity of the grief over the baby I never met. When my adoption failed, there was no funeral. There was no closure or moment to grieve. It was hard to know what to grieve. After all, Sully didn't die, and in some ways it felt selfish to be angry that Sully got to be with his birth mom. But I learned over time that all loss is worthy of grieving. There isn't a litmus test of, is it bad enough? Is it big enough? Is it worthy? It demands space and attention regardless of unrealistic expectations of other people's opinions. Grief is grief. We've all earned the right to navigate it on our own terms. Every person in this room has their own story of loss that we could stand up here and share. I'm no exception. The truth is, as long as we keep living and loving, loss will follow. I don't know a lot about grief, but this is my truth. As much as I want the pain to end, I wouldn't trade it for anything. My friends who are often dealing with aging parents ask me, does it get easier? Pinterest memes, Hollywood, some special help gurus would often say yes, but I disagree. I believe it gets different, that each individual loss is unique in its own right, but still hurts. Equally as amazing is the human ability to hold pain and joy simultaneously. I wish when my mom died, I knew I could grieve the loss of my mom and still enjoy life, that I could still laugh without feeling guilty, that it wasn't an either-or choice, that you can, in fact, find it within yourself to feel the loss, but not lose yourself in the loss. And so I ask again, who do you want to remember today? Something brought you here today. I imagine a loss of someone or something that meant a lot to you, and I want to honor that relationship. And so I ask that you just take a moment and plant your feet firmly on the ground and close your eyes if you choose to, and to take a moment to remember this person or thing that you lost, to allow yourself to feel a moment, to relive it, to go back to that place. What I've come to learn is that we have two choices: to have that memory in the loss or to have no memory at all. that the price of admission to a bold and beautiful life is loss, that in fact everyone and everything we love, we will in fact lose someday, or they will lose us. It's just a matter of what comes first. But we get to keep the memories. My final moments with my dad, conscious, is a memory I'll hold on to for the rest of my life. I watched this larger-than-life man ask for his daughter's permission to die, to tell us he was ready to go after 10 years of fighting an incredible fight, and for us to tell him it was okay. He was ready, even if we were not. I know in my heart that if my sister and I asked him to keep fighting, he would have. That's the kind of man he was. But we also knew he wouldn't be asking if it wasn't time. And so after signing the hospice papers and him saying one last time he was proud of us, we ate a popsicle together. We chatted about weather, the pending storm, Christmas, and later when he could no longer talk and was pumped with morphine, I told him it was okay to let go, that we had said everything that needed to be said. Visiting hours ended, and I said my final goodbye, and he let go in time for us to both be home for Christmas. And life keeps going. I got my first tattoo proudly claiming Sisu and plant sunflowers every year in his honor. I tell my son stories about Grandpa to keep his memories alive. Later today, we'll watch the Packers-Vikings game, just like Dad. Then Jake will go try out for 5th grade basketball traveling team. Time keeps moving. I keep living. And some days, that means nailing the waves of grief. And others, that means clinging to the life raft of family, friends, and memories around me. But I wouldn't have it any other way. In the wise words of my favorite cuddly yellow bear, how lucky am I, and all of us, to have something so special that makes saying goodbye so hard.